once again to discuss things.
It is I, the one, the only. Let's do Yoda. Yoda sounds fun. Okay, let's do that. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is
A geek for fun.
Oh, fun for geek, you mean?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yes, that's not going to get old. Today we are talking about Yoda, on character discussions of characters. Damn, this is going to get hard really fast. Funny joke! Anyway, yeah, so we just decided to talk about Yoda. Do you have strong opinions on Yoda?
I don't know about strong, but he is a character that I think is... You see a lot of people's, like, top 5 Star Wars characters list, and a lot of them don't include Yoda, but mine does. I find Yoda really interesting as a character, apart from the view that a lot of people have of him just kind of being a mentor figure in the background. Like, I really like Yoda as an individual in the universe.
Okay. Yeah, and I really do too. Yoda's one of those characters, like, I think ever since I was a kid, I've really liked Yoda. Sometimes I feel really weird and out of place in the Star Wars fandom, because I'm like when Rogue One came out, I felt so alienated from literally everyone else in the world. Because everyone was like, yeah, finally, a Star Wars movie without any lightsabers or Jedi. It's all just military stuff. And I'm like, wait, we all don't like lightsabers and Jedi? Where have I been? So, like, when it comes to all that side of the Star Wars fandom, like, Yoda's kind of just that coolest, like, little thing about it. And, yeah, just ever since I was a kid, Yoda's just been really cool and interesting. And, like, you know, he's a little funny in the first movie, and then he dies in the second. And then when I was, you know, pretty young, I was... Phantom Menace was 99, so I was 9-10 years old maybe when that came out. You know, I really liked Yoda in that. Hot take. My favorite Yoda line is actually from the Phantom Menace.
Ah.
Yeah, I like the whole fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. I really dig that. That is such a cool little, like, path that he follows. And I remember in, like, the first trailer, or one of the early trailers for the Phantom Menace, that was in the trailer, and I was like, I'm instantly hooked. So yeah, Yoda's always really cool to me. I remember being really excited when I got, like, a Yoda Lego figure, and I'd make little... Lego released this set called the it was like Hollywood or Movie Makers Lego Hollywood set or something like that, and it came with a little USB camera that you could take pictures or video on and create your own stop motion Lego films. I built a Star Wars Jedi Council set. I built a Yoda story and everything, and it was dumb, but man, it was cool.
I imagine.
I had a Yoda minifig, and I had an Emperor minifig, and I made them fight with lightsabers. And this was before Revenge of the Sith, so by the time that came out, I was like, yes! And everyone else was like, that's dumb! And I'm like, you're dumb!
Your Toltemus relationship with the Star Wars fan base just boils down to that quote, doesn't it?
Yes! So yeah, I've always kind of liked Doug Yoda. He's always been one of those characters in the Star Wars lore that I've always thought was just really cool. How about you? What's your background on Yoda?
Well, like, Yoda was one of those characters who's, like, he's so popularized and like in the media. Like he's the light side equivalent of Darth Vader in the fact that he's got the most merch, because he's obviously a recognizable character and like he's obviously got those ticks which people like make jokes about or parody or everything. He's a much representative of Star Wars as a brand, as like the lightsaber or the stormtrooper. So I obviously at a young age I couldn't tell you where was my first exposure to Yoda was, but I definitely remember when I was watching the prequels. He always stood out to me because I always like the wise master trope, but I like the idea of that, of because in those films like he's wrong, and then like once we get to like the original trilogy, we have like the repercussions of him getting kind of bitter about that, but then him accepting it and moving on, and I just really appreciated that as like a narrative of the, regardless of what you think of the quality of those films. I think the idea of having like the literal embodiment of the light side being so used to being right for like 900 years, he kind of gets full of himself and thinks he's automatically has the answers to everything because he hasn't had a single problem in his lifetime. And then seeing how that falls and then he has to rise up and then kind of redeem himself for such a guy who's tiny yet the most powerful guy in the room. Just such an interesting and cool idea to me that always made Yoda resonate with me more than a lot of other characters. Like Yoda is infinitely more interesting to me, like say Han Solo, despite Han Solo being such a fan favorite.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, I do really like the arc. Again, that's the big problem with the prequels. There's a lot of really good ideas that definitely get paid off in the original trilogy. It's just the execution of them is really bad. So like Yoda being this leader of the Jedi Council and kind of like being manipulated into overseeing the Jedi as an army in a war is really, really interesting because you have that line. It's one of the early lines that Yoda has where Luke says, "I'm looking for Yoda. He's a great warrior. War does not make one great." It's so good. Like when you, it's hard to remember the original way that I felt about that because it sounds just on its own as face value. It sounds really kind of surface level wise and sage like, but then once you have the added context of the prequels, that line has so much weight to it, and it's just so damn perfect. I love it. Did you watch Clone Wars at all?
Yes, I watched both versions of Clone Wars.
Okay, well, the good one that's not 2 hours of beating up robots.
Wait, I think you had to clarify after which one the good one is because people would disagree.
Yeah, I know, but like in the Netflix season, they did that really good episode where Yoda goes to Dagobah for the first time, and he like really gets in touch with the Force, and they have him fight like his dark side self and stuff. Oh, I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, there was with that. There's one of my favorite. Because when I went through a Star Wars phase, when I went through like a lot of the novels that came out around the prequels are like really fucking good. And there's a Yoda Count Dooku novel. I can't remember the name. I think it was Dark Rendezvous or something like that. And it's to do with Yoda and Dooku meeting up after Attack of the Clones during the Clone Wars. It's their second meeting. And Dooku has a really good line in that where he talks about like Yoda is the most terrifying being in the galaxy to me, even after I've met the Emperor. Because I know for a fact if Yoda ever went to the dark side, we'd so be fucked. He's this powerful from 900 years of just being pure light side. He's kind of handicapping himself if he ever went to just pure Sith evil. And the fact that they pulled that up in Clone Wars is when you see what the dark side Yoda would look like. It's kind of this creepy gremlin motherfucker, but like, I really like that implication of like, power isn't what he's doing this for, it's entirely for knowledge.
Yeah, it's that wise sage kind of thing, and that's what makes him so much fun in in Empire Strikes Back, where he's like just this kooky little weird Muppet, you know? Like the first 5 minutes of Yoda on screen when he's like beating the shit out of R2-D2 with his cane and stuff is just absolutely hilarious, and I think that's why, like, when you're a kid, Yoda's so immediately attractive to you. He's kind of like a silly old man at first, and then he just starts dropping so much knowledge, and he just seems so interesting. And then he's got, I think, all the best lines in every time Yoda shows up. He's always got such good damn lines and moments. You know, the probably, I guess it'd be "I am your father," and then "do or do not, there's no try." You know? Like, it's hard to think of another Star Wars line as iconic as that.
Yeah, I'd like, I know, maybe, but even then, that's kind of more contextual than the other two, which you can kind of put in more situations.
Mm-hmm. And, like, that one I like so much because it's all just about I like that scene a lot because Luke's got this perception of like, being held back, and Yoda demonstrates just how truly limitless the power of the Force is by lifting the X-Wing. And it's just that moment of needing to show him that I like so damn much. Because I feel like that's a really typical thing in day-to-day life, of just thinking something's impossible until you can see someone do it. And then it completely changes your perception of how a thing can be done or how a thing works. And it kind of just, it opens your eyes in such a cool way. And it's such a great, like, revelation moment, and it all comes through Yoda, who, like, if anyone could lift an X-Wing with the Force, it'd probably be some huge buff guy or something. But no, it's this small little green old man who just does it and makes it look almost effortless. It's perfect.
And I think especially the fact that Yoda is kind of like the embodiment of, like, the light side of the Force, because he doesn't, in, like, the original trilogy, he never uses the Force to, like, attack anyone or anything. He just purely uses that one display, and then that's it. And then everything else is, like, purely for his own, like, life. And then he just passes away peacefully, like, coughing, and, like, not in, like, any grand battle or anything. He just goes to sleep in his bed and rests. And it's very peaceful, very in tune with the world kind of way. And I think that's why I appreciate his character as well, because the fact that he has a sense of humor that goes with it, and it's not just he's putting something on to, like, test Luke, is part of it, but he's also genuinely just always really funny, because once you get to, like, there's one of my favorite tropes. It's in the show, like, Avatar: The Last Airbender, like Uncle Iroh. Yoda has, like, that in common, where the old wise master is also the funniest character, because they've been through life so much, they're kind of seen everything, and all these young kids who think they know how the world works, they're just like, oh yes, of course, young Skywalker, you're trying. And it's just that knowledge of just, it's so humbling but so wholesome. It's just, there's no meanness in Yoda's comedy. It's purely informative, but that's what makes it funnier, because he does know what's fucking up. Mm-hmm. And then you get, like, the twisted version of that with the Emperor, who's just entirely bitter and petty humor, but he also kind of knows what's up as well. But there's two different ways you can go about that, which I think makes them, like, really good opposites.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Is that scene where Yoda fights the Emperor really dumb?
No, it's awesome.
Yeah? Okay. Alfie, I fear sometimes having you on the show is just like having an echo chamber of me. But that's okay, because I need someone to validate these opinions.
Well, like, I think it goes on too long.
That's fair.
And I think... I don't think they should have done it with lightsabers. I think the best part of that fight is when they stop using the lightsabers, and that should have just been the whole thing. But I do think the fight needed to happen. It made sense. Like, why wouldn't you have those two conflict? You got two literal embodiments of light and dark have them clash, and then I also like the implication in that fight that Yoda loses, because I always am of the fan that the dark side is legitimately more powerful, but that doesn't mean it's stronger or better, because the light side's strength doesn't lie in like power, like pushing or lightning things. It's a different kind of like knowledge and like knowing how to do things. So the fact that Yoda has to retreat that fight and then plan for the future kind of gives him the win in the long game. That the entire original trilogy, you could say, is still that fight happening, but Yoda's just playing the long game.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I guess I tend to agree a little bit more if he had a more direct role in the events of the original trilogy, but I can see that interpretation, I guess.
Well, I mean, my thing with that is just everything Luke gets in Return of the Jedi that helps him redeem Vader comes from Yoda's teachings. Like, Obi-Wan's teachings barely have shit to factor into that.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna get into discussion of the Mary Sue, Gary Stu stuff, it's gonna be like, oh, Luke trained for like a week, and suddenly he can defeat Vader.
And he didn't listen for half of that week.
I know, he's just so goddamn headstrong, just like his father. So yeah, I do agree. I really do like the fight between the Emperor and Yoda. It's maybe a little silly, but it's one of those things where if it were the one silly thing in the movie, I think everyone would be okay with it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that it's surrounded by a lot of other things, so it gets harped on along with all those other things. But it's so just instantly gratifying on a really deep level to me that I've always really liked the fact that they do square off. And yeah, you make a good point about the dark side being more just sheer powerful, and I think that's cool. What do you think about the idea of Yoda coming back in The Last Jedi? How did you like that scene?
Oh, when I saw it in the theater, I was absolutely freaked out. And did like a little jump and had to hold in a squirrel because I was like, oh my god. But I think it's a really important thing that it's him instead of Obi-Wan. Because Mark Hamill acting off Yoda is like the highlight of Star Wars for me. Like those scenes of him in Empire are like my favorite Star Wars pieces of media ever, of just Yoda training Luke. And to see that like come back and full circle has a lot more meaning to me, just because fucking hell, it's just testament to both Frank Oz's voice acting and puppetry and Mark Hamill's acting that he made all of that work against a literal puppet in a dingy swamp set. Like, the fact that that's so good is such a testament to like the power of you. If you go earnest with something and you fully commit to it, you can make anything believable, no matter how crazy or weird it is. And that's what I really appreciate. And Yoda coming back to be able to just to tell Luke that, yeah, we fuck up. I fucked up a lot, and look how you turned out. So you turned out pretty good, but then you fucked up. Don't worry, it's part of life. It's part of becoming a teacher. And that's my favorite Yoda quote, is when he says, "We are what they move beyond." Is that such a cool, such a perfect capstone to the idea of like passing on the torch. Yoda's just in. We hits him with the stick, and it's just like, let them have you.
I skimmed them.
I looked at the cover and thought, well, fuck this. I didn't learn to read on Tatooine, Yoda.
Oh man, yeah. It's like I intend the sacred texts. Page turners, they are not. It's so good. It's such like a. It's such a good meta moment that I'm always impressed by the people that hate The Last Jedi and, just seemingly don't comprehend how much of the meta narrative goes around those things. So you've got like the Jedi sacred texts that have been there for generations and are super important, or so we're led to believe. And then Yoda just comes in and just lightning bolt, and burns the whole thing down, because it's not about the past, it's not about what was, it's not about those things that people aren't reading. It's about the future. It's about what will be done. It's about what will be watched. And that's just such a cool meta commentary there. And yet people still like, oh, well, in the old EU, Mara Jane did this, that, and the other. And I'm like, I don't care. I didn't read those for a reason. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying I didn't care. And now I do. And it's time to move on. It's time to go. And like, that's such... It's so cool that Yoda got that very meta breaking the fourth wall moment. And you know, I can honestly say maybe at the end of Rise of Skywalker we can have Yoda kind of be Force Ghost off in the corner like at the end of Return of the Jedi. But honestly, I'd be okay if Yoda never appears in another Star Wars movie, because what he does and the role he fulfills in Last Jedi is literally just the best to me.
It makes it special because, again, it keeps that importance of when Yoda's on screen, it's Yoda's time. Yoda knows when to bow gracefully, but when he appears, even in secondary media, even in Clone Wars, whenever it's a Yoda-centric episode, you know shit's gonna be real because he kind of has a presence with him. But it's like whenever the Emperor turns up, you know, oh shit, this is big because the Emperor doesn't really do much. But when he's here, he fucks shit up. He's important. Whenever Yoda turns up, it's like a comforting version of that. It's like, oh, we're about to learn a lesson. We're about to sit down and let Grandpa tell us how the world works, but in a nice way. So yeah, and with the EU thing as well, is like I mentioned, it's like I read some of the older EU books that have Yoda in them. And why I like the Last Jedi part with that actor so much is a lot of the reason Yoda has to learn in that book is specifically because his relationship with Count Dooku, which maybe we'll get into here because I think that's really interesting, is his Padawan turned to the Sith and his Padawan trained Qui-Gon, and that's where Qui-Gon gets a lot of his anti-council mentality. But he learns through Dooku and like trying to redeem Dooku that, yeah, I spent 900 years I spent like 300 out in the field as a Jedi, and then I became a Grand Master out when I was like age 400, and I spent the rest of it on the Council, as I barely see the universe anymore. So who am I to tell people how they should see the universe and like how they live with it? I don't have the right to just rely on my old teachings when the world around me has changed, and that's like his lesson he has to learn. And the fact that they do that in Last Jedi is he's the one who says, no, stop. Come on. The world needs to be told by the people living in it, not the books written by people written hundreds of years ago. So I think he's a very good example for that message to be told with.
That's a really cool way of looking at it. Let me ask you this, because I'd be fine if Yoda never appears on screen again, as far as like future installments in the proper episodes. Would you watch a Yoda Star Wars story movie?
I would only watch a Yoda Star Wars story if it was about him and young Dooku, and that relationship of like him, Yoda's first like big Padawan. I would be really interested in seeing that on screen, just because I think that'd be a very interesting dynamic, and you could get more into like the philosophy. This is my Star Wars. Is I don't care about the spaceships and the soldiers and military. I want the politics between the Jedi and Dooku being like the communist of Star Wars. I'm very big fan of that, and their relationship is so interesting to me because you have this guy taking on a pupil who's from he's a count. He joins the Jedi because he wants to kind of forget all that, and he wants to kind of know the world as it is, and Yoda tries to take him away from that. But then Dooku comes with this kind of baggage of knowing he's inherently better than other people in his mind, and Yoda tries to smash that out of him, but he just can't, and it's really heartbreaking because he does love Dooku. So I'd like that. I would not like what a lot of popular people want is like very young Yoda, because I don't want to see that. I'm not a fan of Yoda being young, because I don't really need to see how he learned his lessons. I like that being vague and kind of mythic.
Okay. And see, that's something that I really hadn't thought of it in that way, because I'd be open to pretty much just about anything. Disney really has not let me down with Star Wars yet, so whatever story they'd want to tell, because I know that the idea of a Yoda movie has been thrown around. Basically, whatever story they'd want to tell, I'd probably be there for. Whether or not you can tell a good story that makes it... Can you justify a story where he's young is an interesting question, though.
Yeah.
Like, was he always kind of smarter than everyone around him? Did he maybe have to deal with classism on the Jedi Council? Because, he's this weird little tiny dude, and maybe he has to get people to realize the Force is equal in everyone. Stuff like that might be interesting. I don't know. I guess the reason I could justify a really young Yoda movie is something else I want is like, hundreds of years before New Hope or Phantom Menace, I want some of that stuff, and I think that's something Disney's very hesitant to do because it's not, it doesn't have the same kind of marketability as stuff set after New Hope, And so, but if you could tie it in with a young Yoda kind of thing, then you might be able to get away with some of it. Admittedly, Yoda's 900 and the Sith hadn't existed for 1,000 years, so I'm not really sure what you would do.
Yeah, that's my thing, is I feel like if you're inherently gonna go that far, you obviously want to have a different status quo change. And the reason why the prequel trilogy Jedi are the way they were is that the status quo had not been changed for 900 years. So you really do kind of have to, like, Yoda is the benchmark of when the current prequel era started and then continued for all that time. You have to go before him to get like the hundreds of Sith running around and like the loads of Jedis just at constant war with each other, or you go really far after him. I feel like he's always in a state of peace, and you kind of have to do, like, doing a Star Wars story with him is different because it's inherent to his like character arc that there was such peacetime, and he never really interacted with people that could threaten him, and that's why he was so comfortable. I don't know how you make that entertaining for like a 2-hour movie without doing something with like his pupil turns to the dark side or something.
Well, I mean, I really liked the comic that I really liked the arc that they did in the comics where Yoda had to go to a planet where like the Force wasn't quite working the way he was used to, and he ended up having to like fight a mountain creature, and that was like really, really cool and really, really interesting. It was in the Aaron run, but like using the Force there didn't quite work because of what the planet was made out of, and the planet was literally alive. Like, the Earth was alive with all these giant mountain men. And Yoda had to, like, humble himself before a child. And he's like, teach me, master. He like, bows before a child and calls him master so he can learn how to manipulate the world around him in a similar way that he did with the Force, but it's not the same kind of thing. And so he has to just immediately humble himself. So I think you could maybe tell a story like that and have it be kind of interesting, too. Where there's a conflict, but it's not a universe-spanning conflict. You don't involve the Sith. Maybe. I don't know.
You can have them in the background, but as long as they don't meet, then they could be the orchestrators.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, God damn it, there's a scientifically provable force in the universe that can, do shit, levitate the world, connects everybody. It's apparently measurable through your blood. There should probably be more than 2 religions built around it. There could be a dark side users thing that's not the Sith, You could probably get away with something like that, I'd argue.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There are a lot of things like that. I think like the very first, like from what I remember, the older you is how Yoda became a Jedi. Is he was trained by someone on Dagobah, and that's been retconned because they've changed when he first came to Dagobah. But he was trained by someone on Dagobah, and like the reason why the cave there was filled with dark side is because his master and him had to fight a dark side user in there, and when they killed him, it kind of like contaminated the cave.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Yoda's pretty cool, and he's just one of those characters in Star Wars that's just. He's always great. I can't think of a bad thing that's been done with Yoda. You know?
Yeah. Like just the moments in Clone Wars where that episode where he's just with the clone troopers, and like he knows all their names, and like he relates to them on a personal level, and they're like immediately surprised like this because like we're just clones, sir, we're disposable, and he's like, no, not to me, and like, he recognizes little individual traits, and that's such a Yoda thing.
There's that, and then there's like the the fantastic moment in episode 2 where he's like teaching the children, and Obi-Wan comes to him with the problem. He's like, oh, lost a planet he has. How embarrassing. And the kid's like, well, it has to be there. It's like, from the mouths of children. They see all because they're not contaminated by how the world should be. There's something like that. It's so good. So good. Yoda for life. All right. Well, I guess we can go ahead and try recommendations. Let's try this. Let's recommend stuff that is not the movies.
Right.
So I'm gonna recommend the episode in the Clone Wars where he has to go to Dagobah and basically start the whole Force Ghost training. I'm also going to recommend what's it called? I think it's Yoda's Secret War, which is the Star Wars comic I talked about. And then, what else is another good one? I liked him. I liked his appearances, brief as they were in Star Wars Rebels. So you can watch the episodes he shows up in. I think those are good.
For me, the biggest one I'd give would be the novel Dark Rendezvous. Really just it gets into a relationship which like you touch on in episode 2, but then you kind of ignore for the rest of the films, which is Yoda's Padawan Count Dooku working for the dark side, and like their relationship and their history, and like how Yoda interacts with the rest of the council. There's a lot of really good moments in that. Like there's a scene where all the rest of the Jedi Council have to they're part of their training regimen is they have to fight Yoda while he doesn't have a lightsaber, and they can never beat him. They're all completely armed and like, Master, this isn't training us, and he's like, yes it will, you're getting better every day. Stuff like that's really good in that book. So that's my biggest recommendation. And obviously the stuff you mentioned and the Clone Wars episode where he's with the clone troopers, I think is really endearing.
Okay, cool. All right, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm a geek for fun.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.